Hello and welcome, I'm Ali Mustafa and this is Straight Talk. A controversial vote in the Dutch parliament throws Turkey's relationship with the Netherlands into turmoil. We assess the fallout. Plus, once fringe, right-wing movements are gaining ground in Germany. We speak with immigrant communities impacted by the trend. And Turkey's robotic revolution, we visit the country's first mechanical humanoid factory. It's a vote that's further straining ties between Turkey and the Netherlands. Dutch lawmakers have passed a motion recognizing the 1915 killings of Armenians under Ottoman rule as genocide. Turkey denies there was ever a campaign against Armenians specifically, but acknowledges that there were killings on all sides during the First World War. The Dutch government has been quick to contain the political fallout, saying it would recognize the 1915 events as genocide only if the UN does so. Turkey condemned the vote, with its foreign ministry saying the decision is not legally binding. Both countries currently don't have ambassadors in their respective capitals. Last year, a plane carrying Turkish Foreign Minister Mevlut Çavuşoğlu was denied a landing permit by Dutch authorities. They also barred Family Minister Fatma Kaya from entering the Turkish consulate in Rotterdam. And joining me now to discuss this further is political commentator, our very own Salim Atalay. Thank you so much. What do the Dutch have against the Turks in this particular instance?
It's ridiculous. Why now? Why them? They're a little bit late in history, too late for politics. It's quite confusing.
Why is this such a sensitive issue for Turkey?
Well, it is a sensitive issue. The history and the past is there and the future is here. And still, using this issue as a political tool has been the game we've seen around the world for some time. It's a political game for certain lobbies pressuring certain governments, and certain governments just decide that they need to annoy Turkey, and there's this game going on just in Europe currently, which is annoy Turkey game. And apparently the Dutch don't have enough economic interests in Turkey. That's puzzling. On the way here, I was low on gas, and on my way there was a certain Dutch-related station. I avoided that. I went to the next station. Now that first station is also fully Turkish. That's ironic. But how long the Dutch are going to play this game?
Let me break it down for you.
Sure.
This is we have Ömer Çelik,
Sure.
Turkey's EU minister. This is what he had to say in this whole feud.
Arzu ettiğimiz şey,
We would like the Netherlands, a country that has utmost responsibility in the Srebrenica genocide, that has made many mistakes and has great responsibility regarding the genocide, to act more carefully. The decision has no validity for Turkey.
bu konularda daha dikkatli.
That was Ömer Çelik there, the Turkey's EU minister. This is what the Dutch government had to say. The foreign minister, Sigrid Kaag, told a Dutch television channel, the government will not follow the judgment of the parliament, urging utmost caution when applying the term genocide to past events. This cabinet wants to be very careful about relations with Turkey, which have been better. So the Dutch government does seem aware of the consequences of
A ridiculous excuse. Where's the Dutch government originating from? It's the same parliament. It's their government, which is also ironic. Again, another irony that it took the Dutch 208 days to establish a coalition government, and they just very recently did that. And one of the first things that they can think of as a policy implementation is to bring this issue into the game. Just
let me play the devil's advocate.
Sure.
All right. There's a strong anti-Turkey sentiment, not just in the Netherlands, but also you see it in Germany, other places as well. Is there anything that Turkey could have done better?
It's not only an anti-Turkey sentiment, it's an anti-Islam sentiment that they are confusing. I think the Western politicians are confusing this. They think if they egg on Turkey, they'll just be saved from the rest of the Islamic community. It's not true. Everyone is watching how Turkey is being treated. Turkey is supposed to be an EU partner, right? Turkey is supposed to be the ally. Turkey is supposed to be this and that. And negating all those commitments and just turning against Turkey. This whole thing started with Netherlands about their childish games back in referendum of April last year, Turkish referendum. They just suddenly decided to be a party in that referendum. They
stopping the family minister from
exactly.
entering the Turkish consulate.
High-level EU standards cannot handle a Turkish minister holding a meeting with a few hundred Turks, and Dutch security cannot handle that. That was all ridiculous. So they started this. And then in a larger picture, what is the Dutch government doing about what's going on in Ghouta? What are they doing in Syria? What are they doing to prevent the carnage in Syria? So this is just ridiculous game that they're playing.
Salim, you've been avoiding certain Dutch products. Are you planning on avoiding any others?
Well, again, economy matters the most, right? And while stepping this, the Dutch must have considered, and I hope they did, about the economic consequences, about the projects in Turkey, about tenders in Turkey, about the consumer reaction in Turkey, avoiding, sure, lots of Dutch products can be avoided, even tulips. But by the way, tulips are Turkish.
On that note, thank you so much, Salim Atala. Earlier this month, Germany's two major political parties finally came together to form a new coalition government. It was a deal that took months to secure, signaling what many analysts say is the weakening of Germany's political center. What's filling the void? Well, far-right groups have seen their numbers rise significantly, and last September saw the Anti-Immigrant Alternative for Germany, or AfD, win big, becoming the third largest party in parliament. It is now set to become the main opposition. Fears are growing that the rise of the far right may lead to acts of violence against certain communities, as Omer Kablan reports.
It's a country at a crossroads, where the arrival of hundreds of thousands of refugees is bringing out the ghosts of a dark past.
Islam, den mag ich einfach nicht. Das ist de facto so aus der Geschichte heraus. Man sieht's überall.
Germany's far-right movement has gained momentum. The Alternative for Germany, or AfD, has become the main opposition party. And once fringe groups like Patriotic Europeans Against the Islamization of the West, or Pegida, have found a political voice. But many in Germany aren't staying silent. Resistance to Germany's xenophobic past started in the mid-1980s, with the newly arrived generation of immigrants leading the charge. Ercan Yaşaroğlu migrated to West Berlin from Turkey in 1984, and along with his friends he founded an anti-far-right movement after a wave of attacks on his community.
I fear that the current generation will face more discrimination than we have experienced. 20 years ago, we told the German authorities about an underground armed group with racist motives. They didn't believe us.
Between 2000 to 2007, a neo-Nazi terrorist organization called the National Socialist Underground murdered 9 immigrants, 8 of them of Turkish descent. It wasn't until 2011 that the police started to investigate the murders as hate crimes.
There was clear evidence and testimonies from families affected by the National Socialist Underground murders showed there was a racist motive. Instead, police investigated alleged links between those families and the mafia.
Es sind Kerzen für Menschen.
In 2012, German Chancellor Angela Merkel apologized for the police handling of those killings.
Wir tun alles, die Morde aufzuklären und die Helfershelfer und Hintermänner aufzudecken und alle Täter ihrer gerechten Strafe zuzuführen.
According to Germany's official records, there are more than 150 unresolved cases that have been classified as hate crimes.
German police and prosecutors are capable and powerful enough to find out every detail of any of these murder cases. We know this from other murders they have investigated. The odd thing is that it's always when there is an alleged racist attack that the case goes unresolved.
In 2012, 5 friends, all with foreign origins, were waiting at this bus stop. An unidentified man approached, took out a gun and shot all of them one by one. 22-year-old Burak Bektaş, whose parents are Turkish, was killed. The crime is yet to be solved, and his parents accuse German authorities of failing to conduct a proper investigation.
My son was killed because he was a foreigner. He was killed because he had a Turkish name. The case has not progressed one bit. Whatever it was on the first day, that's where it stands now. How is this possible?
Looking through her photo album, Melek says Burak was full of life.
Değişen bir şey olmadı. Yani bu acı bitmeyecek.
Why didn't my child come home that day? I still don't know. I want to know who did this. But Germany doesn't want to reveal the truth. They don't want to be offended with another racist murder. All I ask for is justice.
A call that's been left unanswered for 6 years. But Melek waits for the day her son's murderer will be brought to justice. Ahmad Kablan, Straight Talk.
And joining me now in the studio is Farid Hafiz. He's a lecturer at the University of Salzburg, and Meryem Elayda Atlas, who is a journalist at the Daily Sabah newspaper. Let's begin with you, Farid. You've done an extensive survey involving 35 countries in Europe. What are the attitudes, or what shift in attitudes have you seen towards Muslim communities in Europe?
Well, I mean, basically, I would say like since the 80s and 90s, throughout Western Europe, we have seen a rise of the far right. And I think what is at stake here is really that the consensus after the Second World War, that we do not want to have any more a Nazi regime, a fascist regime, is just breaking slowly and slowly. And especially when we speak about Germany. I mean, Germany is one of the leading countries of the European Union, one of the strongest, the largest in population.
Huge immigrant community.
As so many other Western European countries too. And I think what was very specific about Germany, that Germany for a very, very, very long time did not have any strong far-right political party in the national parliament, other than in France, in Austria, in Sweden and other countries, right? And so
there was a national party, but it was on the fringes.
It was on the fringes, and I think that's the main reason why it was on the fringes is because it was just too old-fashioned in its very Nazi-like anti-Semitic profile.
Even though they say they're not Nazis, but that's the root.
Sure, but it's very obvious the way they speak, the ideology they have, and it's very obvious in this sense. But what we see now with the AfD is actually that the AfD is following a pattern that is much older now in Europe, following the Austrian far-right party, the Freedom Party, the Front National with Marine Le Pen now as head of the party, which is they abandon to represent this kind of anti-Semitic, old-fashioned neo-Nazi style of rhetoric, but they much more embrace a kind of a hegemonic form of racism that is shared by large parts of the society. And at the moment, this is anti-Muslim racism.
It's fascinating that AfD has been able to bring these ideas somewhat to the mainstream. And now you were talking about Pegida. You're talking about Pegida being a much larger movement. You've got Catholics from Latin America who are part of the Pegida movement. So is this tying in? Let me shift the conversation to you, Meryem. Is this tying into this pent-up anger that has been building towards immigrant communities in Germany especially? And what role do the Turks have had to play in this?
Well, if you want to summarize all of this, what is happening in Europe with one word, we see a great departure from the mainstream politics. Now we have problem of extremism and violence in everywhere, but it seems that extremism and violence is only about ISIS and about Middle East, but it is happening everywhere. It is becoming more and more effective. We have to be aware of this. And this is something, starting with the politics, as something criticizing discourses, anti-immigrant, anti-Islam, and it is obviously turning to violence in Europe, and these signs were coming from 2010 and 11, but everybody ignored it and underestimated it. And focusing on Islam and democracy and violence issues, they completely forget the nature of these kind of organizations. It is no longer we're talking about Nazis, but we are talking about everywhere these kind of groups who are apocalyptic and neo-apocalyptic maybe. They have a very different understanding of future. They want to destroy everything, and they are very nihilist, and they do not have attachment like nationalism, religion.
The West always talks about the rise of ISIS and these groups and extremism there, but there are certain things that are happening in the West, in places like Germany. You were mentioning the rise of the AfD and moving it to the center, and this being almost post-national. In 2013 elections, now, so basically the CDU and the SPD were the two main parties, with the CDU at 311 seats and the SPD at 192 seats in Germany. And then 2017 election, we see 92 seats by the AfD, and eating into the CDU and the SPD. I'll turn it to you. Is there something legitimate that is driving this? It gets the term Nazism, as Miriam was mentioning, gets thrown around quite a bit. This is beyond it, isn't it?
It's really not, the issue is not about legitimacy or non-legitimacy, because the AfD did really not bring anything new to the table. Islamophobia was always there. It was there with the Social Democrats and with the Christian conservatives, maybe not in this blatant way of racist talk, but it was, I mean, even institutionally speaking, it was there. And we can say, like, institutionally speaking, that's even harsher. To give you just one example, we had like for a long time, in 50% of all the German counties, we had a ban of the hijab for female teachers in public schools. So what does that mean? That means Islamophobia is at the center of the polity, right? So what the AfD really makes different is it's a single issue party. And it was able to mobilize around this hegemonic racism that is there in Germany. And just
you're talking about the popularity of the AfD. In the September 2017 elections, it was standing at 12.7%. That's a public opinion poll that put AfD second above the SPD as far as the people that were supporting it. In a poll held this month, 16% of the people were supporting the AfD. So the arrival of refugees, that is what spurred all of this over the past few years. That has basically got communities up in arms, that refugees from Syria, from Afghanistan, are now settling in towns and centers in East Germany, in Bautzen, for example. What would you say to that?
Well, I would not say that the arrival of the refugees is the reason, but rather how we spoke about the arrival of the refugees, right? Because, I mean, racism is never about real people. Racism is about imagined stereotyping and scapegoating. That's what racism is about. So when Angela Merkel had the position that everybody is welcome and come as you are, so people were fine with that. But when this political consensus broke, then you had a problem. And when you had the media that also supported this kind of a right-wing discourse, then you had a problem, because then you spread a sentiment within the population which is against actually this Christian welcoming atmosphere of let's be part of our society and also support us and be part of the economic growth of the society, which Germany actually needs.
Miriam, so what's the way forward then? How do you get beyond this? Because as you said, this has gone beyond just nationalism. It's happening in France, it's happening in Germany, across Europe. So how do you overcome this as a Muslim?
In September, in the last October, I'm sorry, in France, some conservative writers came together and issued a report about what Europe has to be. Until 2010, communities or just people, not the governments, but people, intellectuals were discussing about living together, equal but different. And we see that no more this kind of question is on the table. Now we're talking about the others, an imagined community. Europe as an imagined community is failed. And in Germany,
for some it has.
Yes, but you know, some it has. For the people, it's still we have hope, because there are lots of criticisms of AfD or this and that. But governments are stuck with this kind of discourse, and this discourse, anti-immigrant discourse, is selling to people. Okay, these people came to Europe to steal your own wealth. But we know that immigrant communities, migrants or refugees, are not stealing the wealth of the communities. They can have a very positive contribution to the communities as dynamic, young
like
populations.
The Turkish community in Germany.
Yes, like the Turkish community in Germany. So Germany is a huge country with like 80 million people, and it's the biggest population and biggest economy in Europe. But we don't see an economic instability, crisis, unemployment rates goes high, or a sort of governmental crisis. Even they cannot make up a coalition for more than 100 days. There's a still functioning state. So I don't see a serious economic or political crisis in Germany. Still, these kind of discourses going high and high. So according to the literature, we learned that from the Poland politics. So with us, when there are some of economic and political crisis in a country, this kind of sentiments goes high in order to anger and frustration for the people, because they now earn less, spend less, so they pose their anger to the communities. This is not happening in Germany. So we can see that there is an abstract definition of the immigrant as the other, because there are lots of immigrants and lots of women like me, like Turkish women there. The first treatment to you, if you are peacefully walking in the street, nobody attacks you. But if there's something happens, an issue happens in the airport, when it's in the streets, and the first treatment comes, and so you not as a tourist, but we mostly in Turkey here treat the people like Germans as tourists, not coming here to steal our wealth. But this is the first reaction to us, women like me, is behaving and treating them as migrants, living in their communities, living in their countries, so we can behave them in a bad way. So this is the treatment that we experience when we
I'll
visit
give you the
Europe.
last word on this othering of, as Mariam was saying, the othering happens from one side, but it's almost a cyclical process, because if immigrant or refugees are being othered, they themselves then can have these sentiments towards communities that they're living in.
Well, that might be like a logical consequence, but still there is one striking difference. And the difference is that the one who excludes the other is in a power position, right? While the marginalized ethnic minority in most of the cases, or let's say the Muslims in Germany, they are part of the lower level in terms of economic wealth and well-being and representation in politics, etc. So they are the ones who are within the power hierarchy on a very, very, very low level.
Thank you so much. Fascinating conversation. I wish we had more time. Farid Hafiz and Mariam Atlas.
Thank you.
Thank you.
With the advancement of automation, concerns are growing that millions of people around the world will be left unemployed as robots replace human workers. We wanted to find out if that fear is real or imagined here in Turkey. So we sent our Adil Halim to Konya to visit Turkey's first human-like robot factory.
We've been told the aliens are coming, but human-like robots are already here. This guy can talk, listen, smell, and even surf the web. He also has a pretty good memory. Here in Konya, Turkey's first robot factory is mass-producing human-like machines.
Working with robots was my dream since childhood. It's a joyful responsibility.
If things go his way, you'll see these metallic men and women in shopping malls, hospitals, restaurants, and maybe even your own home. The company's founder says the idea is to make human life easier, especially when it comes to manual labor.
This includes working underground, under direct sunlight, a chemical lab, or jobs that are monotonous, which may lead to psychological and biological diseases affecting the spinal cord. It's important for us primarily to make robots to work in these kind of jobs.
But will automation and robotics also disrupt the job market? No doubt cashiers and salespeople will feel the brunt, replaced by automated kiosks and self-help services.
They're not threatening our jobs. On the contrary, they're an opportunity to make our jobs easier, enabling us to work in more qualified, social and productive jobs.
Smaller manufacturers will likely integrate robots into their supply chains as they become more affordable and easier to program. Meanwhile, back in this 120,000 square foot factory, it's a dance party.
Bir robotu yaptığım zaman
When I make a robot, when I code a robot, and it moves according to the code, the moment I feel that I've given it a soul, that's my greatest happiness.
It's not all fun and games. The technological advancements are also a point of national pride.
Robotik sistemlerle çalışmak bizim için
Although working with robotic systems is our job and a scientific activity, it's also a mission and a national struggle for us in the field of technology. We're proud and honoured to carry out such a mission.
Who knows what the future may hold, but one thing is certain, we'd be wise to look over our shoulders as these robots may have our jobs in their sights. Whoa!
And that's all for this edition of Straight Talk with me, Ali Mustafa. If you have any comments or suggestions, do share them with us at #StraightTalk. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Until next time, take care and goodbye.